So what happens if I stop trying to paint the landscape and try to paint the atmosphere instead? I've been watching The Mind of Watercolor for quite a while now. One of the things I love about his work is how much he allows watercolor itself to create the image. So for this painting, I'm going to follow one of his lessons and try to understand how he does that. The beginning already feels very different from the way I normally work. I'm not really drawing anything. I'm establishing areas of color and letting the water soften the boundaries between them. At this point, there's almost no landscape here. There's blue, yellow, water, and paper. But strangely, it's already beginning to feel like a place. And I think that's the first thing I'm learning from this. Atmosphere doesn't have to be something you add after you've painted the subject. It can actually come first. Now the trees begin to appear, and this is where I have to fight one of my instincts. Once something starts looking like a tree, I immediately want to start describing it. Branches, edges, individual shapes. But that's really not what makes this work. Some of these marks barely describe anything at all. They're just changes in value, vertical marks, in places where wet paint runs into wet paint. Our eye does the rest. And that's a very different way of thinking about detail. As the darker values build, the painting suddenly starts gaining depth. What's interesting to me is that the depth isn't really coming from perspective drawing. It's coming from contrast. Some edges are sharp, others disappear completely. Some of the trees are dark enough to come forward, while others almost dissolve into the blue behind them. And the original washes are still visible underneath everything. I'm beginning to understand that those first loose passages weren't background. They were doing much of the work, much more of the work than I realized. This may be my favorite part of the process. At this point, I can recognize the landscape. But when I look closely at it, very little of it is actually resolved. There's an enormous amount of ambiguity, and instead of hurting the painting, that ambiguity seems to make the atmosphere stronger. I'm starting to think the question isn't how much detail should I add? It might be how much can I leave out? Now, I'm mostly trying not to ruin what already happened. That's harder than it sounds. Watercolor gives you these accidental passages that you couldn't really design ahead of time. And once they're there, the temptation is to keep working on them. But every additional mark makes something more specific. And sometimes specificity is exactly what destroys the atmosphere. So I'm trying to add just enough information to hold the painting together without explaining everything. By the end, I'm not really thinking about individual trees anymore. I'm looking at the whole field, where it's dark, where it's light, where something emerges and where it disappears. And that's probably the biggest thing I'm taking away from this lesson. Atmosphere isn't a special effect. It's a way of deciding what you don't need to say. I learned more from this than I expected to. So next, I'm going to take what I learned here and try it on something much more familiar to me, flowers. Not by copying this painting, seeing whether these ideas about water, atmosphere, and restraint can change the way I paint my own work. If you made it all the way through to this, thanks. I want to let you know I appreciate you watching my videos. Give me a like, thumbs up, subscribe if you really found this interesting.